Good evening and welcome to tonight's Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. I am Tabitha Akor. Let's begin. Yesterday, the 30th of November, marked exactly 9 years since the nonagenarian in Yaoundé, Africa's last standing Cold War relic, stood at the Malin airport in 2016 and declared war on the people of southern Cameroun. 9 years since a single reckless pronouncement plunged an entire nation into fire, scattering families across continents, turning peaceful towns into war zones, and pushing millions into survival mode. This grim anniversary is not just a date on the calendar. It's a reminder of how long the people of Ambazonian have endured displacement, repression, arbitrary arrest, burned homes, and the constant threat of violence at the hands of an occupying force. It is also a reminder of the extraordinary resilience of a people who refuse to be raised. As we enter the first day of December 2025, our new spotlight falls on the very human cost of this conflict, from refugees who have lived 9 long years in camps across Nigeria to communities in Nkambe and Nkwen facing fresh waves of intimidation, extortion, and arbitrary arrest by French Cameroun forces, determined to maintain a facade of control. 9 years on, the question remains: how long can a people be pushed to the edge before the world finally acknowledges the truth that southern Cameroon is not a security problem to be managed, but the people fighting for survival, dignity, and the right to exist? Today's reports revisit that reality, reveal the ongoing abuses in the territory, and shine a light on the growing failures of the colonial administration to mask the burning collapse of its authority in Ambazonia. With this, we head on to the prime headlines on Undaunted tonight. Tonight, we take a look at Colonial Divisional Officer imposes bike restriction in Nkambe, exposing deepening panic in occupied southern Cameroon. Also tonight, from the home front, French Cameroon soldiers launch illegal arrest sweep in Nkwen after IED blast extorting families for ransom. Biya regime under fire after detained opposition figure Anicet Ekane died under suspicious conditions. 9 years in exile, Ambazonian refugees mark another December far from home. And on Africa, ECOWAS leaders arrive in Guinea-Bissau for talks after post-election coup. Now taking you to the global scene, Netanyahu appears in court for first time since seeking presidential pardon. With this, we head on to the full briefings of Undaunted tonight. In another sign of growing apprehension among colonial stooges imposed over southern Cameroon, the Colonial Division Officer for Nkambe has issued a controversial communique aimed at masking the regime's crumbling authority with yet another forced show of control. According to the communique, commercial bike riders within Nkambe municipality are now banned from conducting businesses unless they belong to a specific trade union. In addition, bike riders based in Nkambe are forbidden from traveling to Undu, while riders from Undu alone are permitted to transport passengers and goods in and out of Nkambe. Now, to the everyday observer, It may appear to be nothing more than administrative regulation, but to those watching the situation closely, this directive exposes the deeper reality: a regime struggling to maintain a charade of normalcy in a territory where its influence has steadily eroded. Instead of governance grounded in legitimacy, trust, or public confidence, colonial administrators now lean on restrictive orders, selective permissions, and artificial boundaries, despite measures to project relevance in communities where their authority is increasingly rejected. The irony is stark. If the colonial state were truly in control of Ambazonia, there would be no need to micromanage the movement of bike riders, no need to handpick which riders may cross from Undaunted and Nkambe, and no need to force membership into a regime-friendly union. These are not the actions of a confident administration, they are the moves of an insecure one. For residents, the directive is yet another reminder that the colonial regime's control is no longer rooted in legitimacy, but in fear-driven decisions. And for the regime itself, it is a revealing admission. The facade of stability is cracking, and the anxiety within their administrative ranks is becoming harder to hide. As the conflict continues and Ambazonia asserts its identity and resistance, such communiques only serve to highlight the widening disconnect between the colonial authorities and the people they claim to govern. Behind every ban, every restriction, and every forced arrangement lies the same truth: a regime closing its grip, attempting to perform stability while the ground shifts beneath it. That's the report we're having today, and many more on the show tonight. And I'm not here alone. Barrister Mbeseha is right here on the show. Barrister Mbeseha, good evening, and good to have you on the show. Barrister Mbeseha, welcome.
Thank you for having me once more.
Thank you so much. Aside the obvious reason we see of the colonial regime trying to assert control via the communique, there is an underlying truth, if you would agree with me, Barrister Mbeseha. Let's get your thought on this.
Well, in short, I would simply say that is the regime in frustration. What would they not do, and what have they not done? For a take of you remember 2019, I think, their boss, the Minister of Territorial Administration, issued a ban on farm tools, cutlasses, hoes, and of course building materials. That ban is still in force. I see skyscrapers growing up in Bamenda, Kumba, and Biya using the same iron rods that banned. I see farmers producing more cocoa than they produced before 2017 using the same farm tools that banned. And so you come to what this fellow is doing in Nkambe. You are what is he talking about? Restricting the movement of bike riders is by itself a violation of human rights. People are free to move left and right, east and west, north and south. That's the freedom that is guaranteed internationally and nationally. So why do you restrict the movement of bike riders and tell them to go one direction or the other? What power do you have to do that? I'm very sure legally, Mr. Dio doesn't have that power to do that. He doesn't have that authority. And then, but he tries to do it. And then he adds something there. You must register in a certain trade union. Is that Mr. Dio's trade union? Trade unions are private people. People volunteer to register there or not to register. So who is the Dio to call an individual bike rider and compel him or her to belong to a particular trade union in order to drive to one corner of the town or of the division or even of the country? Who is he to do that? He doesn't have those powers. Trade unions are private organizations. They are governed by their law. Membership is voluntary. Those who don't want to go there cannot be forced. And so this is just one too many of what they've been doing. The Dio had better done something else. He can keep himself busy doing something. At least he can go and do sports if he has no work to do in his office. Issuing orders that don't work, that have never worked, yeah, is their DNA. It's not the first. I think it has been done in Mbeseha. It has been done in mineral divisions before. and yet the bike riders have instead increased. They ride their things at will. These are civilians looking for survival. And so if these people have resorted to driving motorcycles for a living, under a government that will not provide any other source of income for them, what do we speak of them? These are frustrated people. These are people who are so defeated that they don't know what to do. You can click at anything, hoping that you can climb on anything and you avoid drowning. They are drowning and they will drown. That will not work. It is not working, it will not work. And so I think Mr. Dio better does something else to occupy himself. Over to you.
Indeed, as you rightly said, it is a violation of the human rights. I mean, this is their source of livelihood, and this is what they're trying to do just to subject them. A country or a state that has consistently refused and rejected all of their interests to control and subjugate them. But then, Barrister Mbeseha, let's move over to this report in French Cameroon. In yet another blatant violation of international law, French Cameroon's occupation forces on Saturday, 30th November 2025, carried out an arbitrary arrest sweep in Mile 4 Nkwen, Bamenda, following an improvised explosive device explosion that killed 2 soldiers. Instead of conducting a lawful investigation, the Colonial Army responded with collective punishment, a crime expressly prohibited under the Geneva Conventions, the ICCPR, and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Video evidence from the scene shows French Cameroon troops moving steadily through residential areas, breaking into homes, dragging out unarmed civilians, and abducting men without warrant or probable cause. Here's one of such videos. Let's take a look. Right there, these operations were executed at night, with soldiers forcing their way into private homes, a hallmark tactic of a regime that has repeatedly weaponized fear to impose control over the people of southern Cameroon. Residents in Mile 4 recount how soldiers stormed homes indiscriminately, rounding up young men as if they were spoils of war and whixing them to the gendarmerie. Once there, families were reportedly told to pay 500,000 francs CFA per person for their loved ones to be released. This is not policing, it is extortion, it is ransom, it is the conduct of an occupying force that no longer hides its contempt for international humanitarian standards. Now, under Article 9 of the ICCPR and Article 6 of African Charter, arbitrary arrest and detention are strictly forbidden. The Geneva Conventions further prohibit reprisals against civilians, collective punishment, and the intimidation of non-combatants during armed conflict. Yet, in southern Cameroon, these protections exist only on paper. French Cameroon's military continues to behave with impunity, treating civilian communities not as protected population, but as targets. This latest rampage in Nkwen follows a long pattern. When the regime suffers losses on the battlefield, it turns its retaliation toward the innocent. Rather than confronting combatants, the army chooses the easier route, terrorizing the defenseless. A house is broken into, a son disappears, a mother is extorted, a community is traumatized. These violations have become the daily lived reality of a people under occupation. The event of 30th November underscores a fundamental truth. Arbitrary arrests are not isolated incidents, but a systemic tool of repression employed by Yaounde's forces. The extortion scheme exposed in Nkwen is only the latest proof that the colonial state has reduced itself to an armed cartel operating under the guise of governance. Now, as the war enters its 9th year, these abuses continue to strengthen the resolve of southern Cameroonians who refuse to surrender their dignity. The world may remain slow to act, but every unlawful arrest, every forced disappearance, and every brazen violation of the Geneva Conventions only deepens the moral and legal indictment of French Cameroon's occupation. Barrister Mbeseha, you could imagine the height of brutality and inhumane treatment. quite unfortunate. Under international law, these arrests would be considered illegal, but in this case, it's the reverse. What do you think, Barrister Mbeseha? Such violations continues to occur with apparent impunity. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, in your monologue, you said something which I will take out from there. You said this is not investigation, it is extortion. That's what I take from there. And I will tell you that I've said here before many times, what they do, they call it in their local parlance, kale kale, rounding up people for doing nothing, taking them to wherever they want, and taking money from them. Kale kale are illegal. There are a gross human rights violations, punishable by different texts, locally and internationally. So they are just criminals. But they use these things to extort. After an IED blast, some people died. Something was destroyed called a military vehicle, which I think was made out of carabout. It was not worth calling it a vehicle. But they descend there to catch people, and they take them away. What did they do there? They claim to be investigating. What's the first thing they ask you? They ask the people to produce their national identity cards. What has national identity card got to do with that explosion there? Absolutely zero. And so if you don't have a national identity card, you are down for some money to pay. You buy yourself out, you will remain there. At the end of the day, they never ever catch anybody. Why? Because unless they are so stupid or so dull to imagine that those who planted that IED there will sit at the corner waiting for them. They can't do for them. Are those boys so stupid? They plant that in there, as strategic as they are, 10 minutes, an hour before, and they are gone there 30, 50 miles away from that spot. And so you go catching people around there. Will they believe that every citizen who lives there cooperated in planting that thing? It's just being naive, if not being stupid. And so, what are these guys doing? Their goal is not even to catch the criminals, because they might very well by themselves be the criminals. Their goal is to benefit from the situation, extort money from people, rape women who cannot get free if they are detained, do whatever thing they wish to do and go free. Though they themselves are criminals, their bosses that command them to do these things are criminals. They are taking instructions illegally and being shielded by some people. When the time comes, each and every one of them will bear responsibility for their own acts. I only wish that the careful one amongst the victims, that's the population, are taking note. It is possible, if you can recognize them by their names, put their names down. There will be a time that each of them will call to answer for what they have done. If you lost your money, if they extort money from you, if you can recognize them, put their names down. But even without identifying them individually, collectively they are responsible for what is going on there. As I've said, they might very well by themselves be the one who planted that IED. But they rightly say, I think, the IED was planted by Ambazonian fighters. That is what they deserve. It targeted a military convoy. It destroyed their truck. That's a legitimate target. And they have to suffer those consequences until they leave. They cannot retaliate on that, because we don't have vehicles that they can plant against us. We have nothing. Our boys are going on foot. If they planted that idea, they came on foot, dug the thing and planted it and went away. And so these people are criminals. They must pay for the occupation, and that's part of the payment. I don't know why their own citizens don't revolt. The parents of those two who are said to have died, what are they dying for? Dying for occupying a foreign territory? Dying for protecting the money, especially from Sonara, that the ordinary citizen in East Cameroon does not even enjoy. The monies come in, the president steals it with his close people, with his wife, with his family, and your children go and die, and you continue to let them go there. It is not a pride at all to any family to have a son, a daughter, to belong to such an army, an outlaw army, an army of terrorists. There's no pride there. If I were you, I would send my child there. For those of them who were there, if I were you, I would withdraw. It's better to go and make a cocoa farm if it is possible, or ride on motorcycle and leave than to venture into territory where your life is taken off. And of course, we're very sure those guys who are even dead, nobody will even compensate them for dying in the war front. Today, to our ASAs, I say congratulations for doing a good job. Keep on the fight, target them properly, be sure you don't fail, get them down until such a time that they recognize that the occupation is becoming impossible to bear. They will pack back or they will push back. Over to you.
That's a great word right there, and encouragement right there to the Ambazonian State Army. It's a great one, and we hope that this keeps on, and then we see greater breakthroughs in the coming day. Barrister Mbeseha, we have this report still. In a striking and unsettling twist in French Cameroon's political landscape, the death of political figure Anicet Ekane was officially announced not by a medical authority, not by a government spokesperson, or by a military officer. A political personality dies under questionable circumstances, and it is the military that steps forward to break the news, a detail that deepens concerns and fuels the perception that this was not a natural passing, but a death managed, handled, and delivered by the very forces meant to protect civilians. Observers have called it the height of irony and perhaps even an unintentional confession. When a regime hunts its opponent to the point where their death must be reported by soldiers, the message speaks louder than any official statement ever could. What is even more jarring is the background of Anicet Ekane's ordeal. His detention conditions were described as nothing short of hellish. He spent 40 days in detention, and for the last 3 weeks, he repeatedly cried out that his oxygen extractor, a medically necessary device, had been seized from him by Gendarmerie Colonial Otulo. He was deprived of comfort, deprived of medical support, deprived of dignity, and ultimately deprived of air. In the end, it wasn't a prison sentence, it was a slow, suffocating execution carried out in silence. And the question that lingers is painfully clear. On what legal basis was he detained? By all accounts, none that can stand without and withstand scrutiny. His only crime, according to those close to him, was sponsoring an opposition candidate who won the elections. Now, in the current political climate, defeating the CPDM, even democratically, appears to be treated as an offense punishable by death. These analysts say is also why former Prime Minister Issa Chiroma Bakri, once one of the staunchest defenders of the Biya regime, is now reportedly on the run. The irony is unmistakable. Even those who stood firmly with the regime are not spared where their usefulness fades or when they cross invisible red lines. The case of Anicet Ekane now stands as yet another example cited by critics as proof of the Biya government's increasingly ruthless and deeply authoritarian posture. A regime where political rivalry is treated as a national security threat, where detention replaces dialogue, and where death, sometimes slow and suffocating, becomes the final instrument of intimidation. Barrister Mbeseha, we see that from a legal standpoint, how does a political detainee die in custody like that of Anicet, with a military officer, not a medical judicial authority, being the one to officially announce his death? And this is still considered lawful under Cameroon's own procedures or international standards. Barrister Mbeseha, what do you think about this?
No, it's not the semantics that matter. Even if his death was announced by the Supreme Court president, which is legal, it would not have changed anything. Anicet Ekane has been murdered. What is his crime? He has only one crime: supporting an opposition that won the election. But before Anicet, his Maninem supported Anicet. supported Chiroma, that supported Kamto, leading up to the selection of the candidates. What did they do? The Minister of Territorial Administration committed what we call open daylight armed robbery by breaking into their own site of their own website and changing the information by manning them just to disqualify Kamto. They did not imagine that Maniden would support another candidate. After Kamto was disqualified, they thought that was the end of the journey. Then suddenly came Issa Chiroma, who won the endorsement of Maniden, led by Anicet Ekane, and won the elections. Remember, the elections were on the 12th of October. Before the proclamation of the results officially, a few days before, on the 24th or so, they went and captured him from his house. They knew that his candidate had won. They went and captured him. He went there to the police station to find out about his uncle when they or his niece. They arrested him. Within hours, they did whatever thing to him and took him to Yaoundé. If Anicet Ekane committed any crime in Douala, what was he doing in Yaoundé? They took him to the murder chamber. That way they killed everybody who opposes them. And a few days, 2-3 days after that, when the Constitutional Council gave the results and declared that Mr. Biya had won, when everybody knew that he had lost, what did they do? They took guns to run after Chiroma. They hired planes to make sure they killed Chiroma. The poor Chiroma was on the run, escaped to Nigeria, running for his life. For doing what? For winning an election. If Chiroma had not been lucky to find refuge in Nkambe, he would be dead by now. For doing what? For winning an election against Biya. This is political murder. There's no true explanation to it. I can conclude with this. The government has reacted in two ways. The communication minister has reacted to Anicet's death. The Minister of Defense has reacted. These are all government ministers. The spokesperson for the government, who's speaking for the whole government, he says some lines there that which are so important. He said, if you have been consulted, he's not talking for himself, he's talking for the government. If we were consulted, they were taking a different action. They would not have been arresting Anicet Ekane. This is a spokesman for government. He's not speaking for himself. Then the Minister of Defense gives a justification for capturing the guy, framing some charges against him, which could not hold. But what he ends up by saying that, well, the cases have some relationship with the military tribunal. If you have a case connected to a military tribunal, the military must go and adopt you, catch you and bring there physically because the military tribunal. And he said the man was under judicial detention. By who? Ordered by who? And for how long? The law on detention has its own limits. Even their so-called administrative detentions, they cannot last for more than 30 days. And he said he was there for longer than that. And so you find a compilation of illegalities, of fraudulent intentions to hide the death of somebody that they willfully killed. The only thing I ask and I doubt, and I will continue to doubt until the contrary is proved, is that what these people in Cameroun, like people in Cameroun, what are they made of? Are they human beings? This is a death that should send everybody to the street. Even if you don't know him, why did Biya agree to have multipartyism? If you must go down and hunt your opponents, and if you don't get them, you kill them. If you don't suppress them politically, you eliminate them physically. What country is that? What country does that in the world? I don't imagine one. Even people that have overtaken government by a coup d'etat, they don't kill the leaders. They try them for alleged crimes. So Anicet Ekane was killed. They took him there. The claim was already sick. But there's a principle in law that take your victim as you find him. If you carry a hammer and hit my head and I fell down and died. I'm trying to explain that principle. You cannot excuse yourself that this man had already a very weak skull. His skull was so soft that my one-up killed him. One-up broke his skull, was a soft skull. You killed him. The fact that Anicet Ekane was already sick is not a justification for killing him. They killed him. If there's any accountability in the world, I think these people should be held accountable. And good enough, the people who handled him, I went on, they are not the lower class soldiers. He's the Minister of Defense defending it. He's the Minister of Information and whatever thing defending it. People at the top level of the government. The Minister of Defense, the whole ministry is attached to the presidency. They call him Minister Delegate at the presidency. So these are people who take direct instructions from their dead boss, Mr. Paul Biya, or from a surviving widow Chantal Biya, or for their cousins, Gongo, or whatever it is. But if people cannot be angry with this thing, I doubt when they will ever be angry. This is criminal, this is unacceptable, this is wrong. I mean, if a bishop in Yagua said it 6 months ago, that we better take this thing and give it to a devil, we cannot see what it means now. This is a devilish state. We better take it and throw it in the ocean, if that is the devil, rather than to let these things continue to happen to human beings. We are not part of the Republic of Cameroon, but Anicet Ekane was a human being like you and me. We have to make these commentaries, not because we are part of their system, but because we are part of the human race. Humanity was not meant to be treated in that way. A human being, wherever you are, you have 2 eyes, 2 hands, we have the same thing. No matter whether you're in China, whether in the United States, whether in Cameroon or in Ambazonian. This crime is wrong. People must be held accountable, and whoever is involved should be punished, given the adequate punishment. I don't know what you can do to compensate the family of Anicet Ekane, but in short, they must be held accountable, the maximum that is possible in the world. Over to you.
Indeed, Barrister Mbeseha, there is no justification for this death. And then it was the concern, while there is no uproar, people are not even speaking, there is no commentary. We do say they are scared of the system, or they are tired of speaking and then crying out, and it's still falling into deaf ears. But then we'll definitely get to see the reactions, most probably in the coming days. Now, Barrister Mbeseha, let's head into this report. We have in this report today, the first day of December 2025, we turn our spotlight to a story that has become the silent heartbeat of our nation, the story of Southern Cameroonians forced into diaspora. A story of war, displacement, survival, and an unbreakable people holding on to identity even when everything else has been stripped away. 9 years ago in 2016, the conflict that began as peaceful protests escalated into a full-blown armed conflict after the Biya regime declared war on the people of Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia. What followed was a humanitarian disaster that has reshaped the lives of millions. Entire communities were uprooted. Families woke up citizens and went to bed refugees. Many Southern Cameroonians lost their homes in a single night. Shelter, livelihood, possessions, all gone without warning. Forced to run with nothing but the clothes on their backs, they crossed borders into Nigeria searching for safety, hope, and a chance to rebuild from scratch. But displacement came with a new kind of suffering. In some parts of Southern Cameroon, Biya-backed local figures took advantage of the chaos, selling abandoned homes, taking over people's properties, and stripping refugees of the little they left behind long before they ever had a chance to return. Now today marks 9 years in refugee camps across Nigeria, 9 years of uncertainty, 9 years of survival, and 9 years of people waiting for justice, dignity, and the freedom to return home. The United Nations Human Rights, despite its global mandate, has been unable to fully support the overwhelming needs of these refugees. Let's take a look.
Yeah, as you can see today is 1st of December 2025. These are Cameroonian refugees, Southern Cameroonian refugees that they flee away from the war in the Southern Cameroon since 2018. They have been here for close to 9 years now. So many of them have left immaturely because of the insecurity in Nigeria, because of the abandonment of UNHCR Nigeria. They are here today because they don't have water, they don't have good health care,
No insecurity.
because a lot of people are crying. Even the international community, the United States of America, United Nations, they knew there is war between the Fulani headmen, terrorists, kidnappers, bandits in Nigeria. The refugees in Cameroon, the Southern Cameroon refugees have been abandoned. These are few of them. Most of them left this morning because of insecurity. Yesterday, there was an incident in the neighboring community that some Fulanis were chased by host community. Not to talk about refugees that have been left to secure themselves without any security. This police station was built few months ago, have been abandoned without no security personnel.
That's the SEMA office.
That's the SEMA office that have been abandoned without no health and security personnel. So we are calling on UNHCR International, Geneva, should look into the problem of the abandonment of refugees in Nigeria.
Especially the security situation.
Because we know that refugees are stainless citizens.
This is a heartbreaking situation on ground. As the years pass, resources tighten, the world motion and donor fatigue has become a painful reality. Yet in the middle of that silence, one hand has remained consistently extended, the hand of Ambazonians themselves. The government of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia, under President Samuel Ikome, along with a few genuine and patriotic citizens, has been the lifeline for thousands of refugees. For 9 years, it has been the same people giving, the same people contributing over and over again, even when their own resources are limited. That spirit of we cannot abandon our own remains one of the strongest pillars of the struggle. And as Christmas approaches, a season that often deepens the pain of separation and loss, the Ambazonian government is once again mobilizing despite donor fatigue, despite limited resources, despite the pressure of 9 long years. There is a renewed push to ensure that, like every other Christmas, refugees in Nigeria receive food items, support, and a reminder that they have not been forgotten. For the mothers raising children in foreign lands, for the elders who dream of seeing home before their eyes close, for the young people who have never stepped foot in the land that bettered them, this support means more than survival. It is hope, it is identity, it is dignity, it is Ambazonia. As we step into December, the month of reflection and giving, we shine this spotlight not just to tell their story, but to remind the world that 9 years is too long, and these citizens deserve more than endurance, they deserve a future. Barrister Mbeseha, as we mark 9 years of our people living in refugee camps, you've just seen that in the video, with donor fatigue setting in and the Ambazonian government still struggling to reach every family, what would you say to Ambazonians at home in the diaspora and to the wider international community about the kind of support that is urgently needed right now? I mean, it's been 9 solid years to help these refugees survive this Christmas and even beyond.
Well, what I can say is that everybody must reflect. What leads people to become refugees is the question of life or death. People don't volunteer to become refugees somewhere. People are forced into that status. Either you escape and become a refugee, or you die a premature death. But being a refugee is not a reason why you should go there and die a slow death. If you didn't escape, somebody will shoot you and kill you. Once you have escaped, you should not be abandoned to gradually die of hunger, to gradually die of diseases that are curable. The whole world should come to your assistance. That's the reason for which the United Nations created that agency to assist, because the United Nations itself was created to avoid wars. So they know the consequences of wars. All wars come with refugees, and the agency was created to handle that. And if you abandon them, it is a great misfortune. It is very, very unfortunate. We, the Ambazonian people, out of pocket, we have done our best. We have done our best and will continue to do our best. We can all call on others to help us and then remind ourselves that the reason why these people are out there being refugees is the reason why we fight. Their pictures should motivate us to fight this thing to the end. Because they were just peaceful people living in their homes. When somebody violently attacked them, burnt their homes, they were lucky to escape to Nigeria. Some escaped to other places and became internally displaced. This cannot be left to us alone. We are doing our best. We can give congratulations to the President Sako, who has, at least in his own best interest as a government, tried to do something to give a smiling face to those children during every Christmas. That is what it is. And so, again, we are in trouble. And then there are people who should have helped us. I remember, if I'm not forgetting, in the churches, most particularly the Catholic Church, they have services for refugees. In Nigeria, there are so many Christians, different Christians, Baptists, Catholics, they're all there. If their missions back home in Cameroun, in Ambazonia, or in Cameroun in general, can mobilize some of their services for refugees, that might add a little bit relief to the suffering of the people there. I'm sure if on Sunday, be it a Presbyterian church, Baptist, or Catholic church, they pass a basket to help our refugees in Nigeria, 1 month they will raise at least 1 million. That will not be too small. That will be highly appreciated. This is a special mission for those Christians in Ambazonia. The Catholic Church, for example, you should not spend all their time going to Yaoundé to Tongo, how to accompany them before, during the elections, and after. Because the goal of humanity is not to vote people. So we'll plead with the churches, Catholics, Baptists, all Christian churches, Muslims, to come to the assistance of these people. They need the help. I think they have been completely forgotten. Even those who are internally displaced. I'm not sure, I may be wrong. I'm not sure that, for example, if we went to Douala, the Diocese of the Catholic Church or Presbyterian, you'll find them organizing something for the internally displaced who have escaped to Douala. Similarly in Bafoussam or Komsamba, these people are just left there to be there at their own mercy. But again, as Ambazonians, it should remind us that is the reason why we fight. If they were to return home, so these people have no home to return to. Their homes were destroyed, some leveled. I know some homes were somewhere in Kumba there, where they came with graders and bulldozed the foundations to be sure they will never ever live there anymore. It is more than humanity, it is more than criminality. So we are calling on the people to do something. We are calling on the United Nations Agency in Nigeria not to abandon them. That's their responsibility. They are capable of doing it. They raise funds all over the world to help refugees. And these are refugees. Why is their own case different? Again and again. The answer is not returning home, because the bulk of them have no home to return to. I know places, Kwakwa, where everything was burnt down. Areas in Nkambe where people have no houses to return to. So asking them to return home is not an answer. Assisting them at this point is the best help. And then, of course, compelling, if you have the possibility, forcing Yaoundé to come to the conference table so this crisis can end and people will come back home, possibly with assistance to rebuild, is the best approach. And so we can only wish them best Christmas out of the duty that they can have. And then we can also say Happy Christmas and thank you, Mr. President, for doing what you are doing out of the little that you have. The intention is there. Your physical cash is small. We must appreciate what you are doing. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Barrister Mbeseha, for the kind felicitation already, wishing them a Merry Christmas. And definitely with time, they will be back home and everything will be sorted and they would have peace once again. Thank you so much for being together with us on the show tonight. It's been an awesome time having you give your thoughts and perspectives to this report and duly analyzing this report for the home front, people from the home front to definitely get a better view as this report keeps unfolding. Thank you so much. This is where we'll let you go.
Thank you for having me.
Into the rest of the news. Welcome back. We're heading into the news on Africa. A high-level ECOWAS delegation arrived in Guinea-Bissau on Monday to begin mediation with the military authorities who seized power last week. Now, as the regional bloc pushes for the full restoration of constitutional rule, the mission is led by ECOWAS chair and Sierra Leone's President Julius Maada Bio. Their arrival comes at the junta, which took control 3 days after a disputed presidential election imposed a nationwide ban on demonstrations, strikes, and any activities it considers a threat to public order. The military also directed all ministries and public institutions to resume operations. The coup followed a fiercely contested vote in which both leading candidates claimed the victory. During the takeover, President Umaru Sissoco Embalo told French media he had been removed from office and detained. He later fled to Brazzaville in the Republic of Congo. The military has appointed former Army Chief General Hota Intaa to head the transitional government tasked with steering a one-year transition. Intaa has unveiled a 28-member cabinet largely made up of allies of the ousted president. Meanwhile, Nigeria announced that President Bola Tinubu has authorized protection for opposition candidate Farnadodias Das Costa, citing threats to the politician's safety. A letter from Nigeria's foreign ministry to ECOWAS confirmed that Da Costa is currently sheltering at the Nigerian embassy in Mbeseha and requested regional security support. ECOWAS suspended Guinea-Bissau from its decision-making bodies the day after the coup and dispatched the delegation now in Bissau to press for a return to constitutional authority. However, we see that the United Nations has also voiced strong concern. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the military takeover, warning that overturning the result of the November 23 election undermines democratic principles. He urged the immediate restoration of civilian rule and the release of detained officials, including electoral commissioners and opposition figures. Still on tonight, UNAIDS is urging world leaders to strengthen international support for HIV prevention and treatment, warning that the global response has suffered its biggest setback in decades. A recent UNAIDS report highlights that domestic funding alone cannot meet the needs of countries most affected by HIV. Abrupt reductions in international aid in 2025 have intensified funding gaps, undermining efforts to curb the epidemic. Over 60% of women-led HIV organizations have faced funding losses or have had to suspend activities, while key prevention programs have been severely disrupted. The number of people using HIV prevention medicine has dropped sharply in countries including Burundi, Uganda, and Vietnam. Currently, 40.8 million people live with HIV worldwide, with 1.3 million new infections recorded in 2024. About 9.2 million remain without access to treatment. UNAIDS is calling for increased investment in innovative, affordable prevention and treatment options, including the rapid rollout of medicines such as lenacapavir to reach 20 million people and reduce costs through broader production. The report titled Overcoming Disruption, Transforming the AIDS, where the AIDS response underscores the far-reaching consequences of reduced international support, which threatens progress toward the 2030 global AIDS strategy. According to the OECD, external health assistance is expected to decline by 30 to 40% in 2025 compared to 2023. potentially causing severe disruptions to health services in low and middle income countries. Without renewed global solidarity, an additional 3.3 million HIV infections could occur between 2025 and 2030. With this, we head on to news across the globe. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appeared before the Tel Aviv District Court on Monday, marking his first in-person session since formally requesting a presidential pardon in his long-running corruption trial. The appearance came a day after Netanyahu submitted a plea to President Isaac Herzog asking for clemency from the corruption charges that have trailed him for several years. The request has intensified political divisions in Israel, with critics insisting that any potential pardon must be tied to an admission of wrongdoing and a full withdrawal from political life. Monday's hearing proceeded without judicial discussion of the pardon request, according to Israeli media report. Netanyahu has asked the court to cancel his next scheduled appearance, citing diplomatic and security commitment. Judges are expected to review the request. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has frequently attempted to delay, shorten, or reschedule hearings since the trial opened on May 24, 2020, often citing travel requirements, security considerations, or the ongoing military campaign in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli leader is on trial in 3 separate corruption cases, making him the first sitting prime minister in the country's history to serve as a criminal defendant. He denies all allegations. Beyond the domestic charges, Netanyahu also faces international legal pressure. In November 2024, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrant for him and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant on accusations of war crimes and crimes against humanity linked to Israel's military operations in Gaza. More than 70,000 Palestinians, predominantly women and children, have been killed since the conflict escalated in October 2023. According to humanitarian agencies. Still on tonight, European leaders close ranks behind Ukraine as Trump envoy heads to Moscow. European leaders moved on Monday to reaffirm their support for Ukraine as Washington and Kyiv continued efforts to revise a controversial U.S. peace proposal initially reviewed as favorable to Russia. The push came as United States President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff traveled to Moscow to brief the Kremlin on recent negotiations. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris, where both leaders joined a call with counterparts from Britain, Germany, Italy, Poland, and the European Union to coordinate positions on the stalled peace process. At a joint press appearance, Zelensky outlined Kyiv's core demands: safeguarding Ukrainian sovereignty, securing firm international security guarantees, and resolving territorial issues that remain the most difficult part of the talks. He appealed to Western governments to ensure Russia does not benefit from its invasion and said he expects to engage directly with Trump after Witkoff's Moscow's discussions. Meanwhile, Macron stressed that decisions about Ukraine's territory must rest solely with Kyiv as negotiations evolve. Zelensky signaled that Ukrainian and U.S. negotiators have not finalized changes to the 28-point U.S. proposal despite 2 rounds of discussions. The original draft required Ukraine to surrender more territory than Russia currently holds, reduce the size of its military, abandon its ambition to join NATO, and prohibit Western troop deployment. These terms, Kyiv and European partners argue, would leave the country dangerously exposed. The latest talks were held on Sunday at a Florida resort owned by Witkoff. Afterward, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio described progress as incremental but stressed that sensitive issues remained unresolved. He indicated that further movement would depend on Russia's reaction during Witkoff's Moscow's meetings. The diplomatic push comes at a moment of heightened pressure for Ukraine. Its forces are losing ground on the Eastern Front, and the government is grappling with its most serious wartime corruption scandal. Zelensky's chief of staff, who had led Kyiv's negotiating team, resigned after investigators searched his home, and 2 ministers have been dismissed in related investigations. President Donald Trump, who has pledged to swiftly end the conflict, has voiced impatience over the slow pace of a potential deal and pointed to Ukraine's internal challenges as an obstacle. Now on the battlefield, Russia continues to advance slowly across the 1,200-kilometer front. A missile strike on the central city of Dnipro on Monday killed at least 4 people and injured 40, according to local officials. The attack hit car repair shops, leaving multiple workers wounded by debris. Russia also claimed control of the settlement of Klinov in the next region, though the situation could not be independently verified. Moscow maintains it is close to capturing Pokrovsk, which would mark its most significant gain in nearly 2 years. Meanwhile, nightly long-range strikes continue to hit Ukrainian energy infrastructure, leaving cities cold and dark as winter sets in. Ukraine has responded with its own long-range attacks targeting Russian oil facilities and tankers in the Black Sea. The Kremlin condemned Monday's strikes on an oil export terminal connected to Kazakhstan's pipeline system. That's the news coming up from the home front. With that, we come to the end of Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. But before we go, a recap of our major headlines. And tonight on Undaunted, we saw that Colonial Divisional Officer imposes bike restriction in Nkambe, exposing deepening panic in occupied southern Cameroon. Also tonight, we took a look at French Cameroon soldiers launch illegal arrest sweep in Nkwen after improvised explosive device blast extorting families for ransom. Biya regime under fire after detained opposition figure Anicet Ekane dies under suspicious conditions. Also tonight, we took a look at 9 years in exile. Ambazonian refugees mark another December far from home. And also tonight on news from the African scene, ECOWAS leaders arrive in Guinea-Bissau for talks after post-election coup. And from news across the globe, we took a look at Netanyahu, who appears in court for first time since seeking presidential pardon. And that is all on Undaunted tonight, bringing into the news untold stories. On behalf of the entire Undaunted newsroom, we say thank you for joining. We'll leave you with ABC Amba TV images. Good night and God bless you.